Well, does anybody doubt that sex is a big deal today? I would hope not, because let's face it, we live in a sex-saturated culture. It is overwhelming. And as a matter of fact, that some of the things that we find out that even Christians are wrestling with today are not separate problems. You may look at same-sex marriage or transgender bathroom issues or even the breakup of the family with divorce and things like that. And you may think that they're all kind of different kind of issues, but they're not. They're all, I think, a subset of a much bigger problem where Christians have lost their focus. Now, we see sex everywhere we turn today. We see it on the newsstand as we get ready to buy our groceries. You can't avoid it, right? Things that don't even pertain to sex are made sexy, like clothing. You know, how do we get from, hey, this is a wonderful outfit for you to wear, to something that becomes provocative? Television shows, even from supposedly safe channels like the Discovery Channel, that air really strange things. And that permeates in our society, and it changes who we are. So much so that parents are even willing to take their young children and sexualize them in order to give them a leg up on society. That's a problem for me. Now, this is nothing that's mind-blowing. I mean, obviously, we've seen this all before. But why? Why did we go this way? What happened? How did it change? 100 years ago, you wouldn't have seen any of this stuff. So what happened in the last, few decades to make the shift be so blatant so quickly? And a lot has happened, but a lot of it has come from our modern understanding of what sex is. And one of my issues is I don't think the church does enough to counteract the message of the culture. They try, but I think they've got the message wrong. Now, I first kind of got an understanding of what sexual attraction and things is from my youth in television. This is kind of the first thing that I heard.
Hi, Bobby. Oh, hi, Millicent. Cindy's inside.
I didn't come here to see Cindy. I came to see you.
Me? What for?
To thank you for making that boy stop teasing me in school today. You're very brave.
Oh, it wasn't anything.
It was too, and I really appreciate it. Bobby, what's wrong?
Huh? I'm not sure.
Okay, so as a young child seeing the Brady Bunch, I said, "Wow, that looks pretty good," right? That was my first initiation to the world of girls, so to speak. But I think that's what a lot of people think love is, and I think that's what. Now, by the way, does it scare you guys that I have videos in this talk? Does this bother? Okay, I'm just wanting to make sure. So that's what happens. We think sex equals fun. This is our message that society tells us, and it starts very subtly, right? And in the 70s, let's face it, that's fairly innocent. That's a fairly innocent clip. But by the 90s, we've changed, and we created something that I call the lovable Lothario. The lovable Lothario. What's the lovable Lothario? This is a character now that's appeared frequently in televisions. It was a person that in real life you probably wouldn't want to be with, but on TV he seems to be okay. So let me take an example from a very popular show here, Friends.
A great dinner.
Yeah, and hey, thanks again for letting me have that last piece of cake at the restaurant.
You're welcome again. I'm gonna go make some coffee. Can I get you anything?
Do you have any cake? So, this is going pretty good. Dinner was nice. We got a lot in common. Ooh, Victoria's Secret. Huh. We even like the same books. Whoa, there's a scary painting. Wait a minute. I think I've been scared by that painting before. You know what? This whole place looks familiar. I have definitely been in this apartment. I know I've seen this weird plant before. Ow! It did that the last time. Oh my God. I've gone out with this girl before. Yeah. We had sex on this couch. And then on that chair. And no, we didn't do it here. Which is weird because it seems like a perfectly good place.
Oh, that's why.
Okay. You get the idea. I mean, most television shows have this guy now. And he's really got a heart of gold, even though he just met this girl. He doesn't remember sleeping with her before. And of course, what happens in the course of this episode is it turns out he slept with her roommate. But you can see what the plans are. If the girl was your sister, would this be so funny? If this was real life, would you take the same approach to it? But this is the progression that we've had. And when sex is fun, when pleasure is elevated in our society, what happens is we start to look for that in everything, and relationships get twisted. So the story of David and Jonathan, for example, gets twisted. In 1 Samuel 18, verses 1 to 3, David and Jonathan, remember Jonathan's King Saul's son, and David and Jonathan become really good friends with one another, closer than ever. And 1 Samuel 18 says, as soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. And it goes on, and later on in 1 Samuel, it discusses how David's going to go off to war, and Jonathan wept. And even when Jonathan died, David cries, saying, I loved him more than with the love of women. I loved him more than what I would love women, basically. And modern day liberal theologians, and of course those in homosexual communities, try to point to this as a homosexual relationship, kind of Brokeback Mountain of the Bible or something. That's what they try to paint this as, because they can't understand what a bond between men that's not necessarily sexual, but is close, but is intimate looks like. Let's face it, what do we do now? Hey bro, right? And it's still the punchline. If you give a guy a hug, it's like, ooh, hey, what are we doing, right? Kissed him on a cheek is a lot of the biblical, oh no, hey, we can't do that, right? That kind of thing. And it's not just this. How many of you saw Captain America Civil War? It just came out this weekend. There was an article, get this, there was an article that came out in one of the fan websites asking, is Captain America bisexual? Because he and Bucky's relationship seems to be so close. Now, Chris Evans, who plays the actor for Captain America, Steve Rogers, said, no, I didn't play him that way. That's an interesting idea, but I've never tried to project that. And the actor who plays Bucky said, well, people are free to assume whatever they want. The actor who played Falcon, though, I think had the proper response. And he writes, if you look at different generations, the idea of being a man was vastly different to what it is today. The camaraderie, as you call it now, bromance, between two men was accepted. It was almost the way you'd be someone's friend. Today, it's more about borrowing someone's car or using their cell phone. It's just a different way of being someone's friend. That's Anthony Mackie. So he's right. But you see what happens is we can take even the most mundane relationships. We don't know how to be close to one another. We don't know how to support one another because the sex thing gets in the way, to borrow the line from Harry Met Sally. And that's probably part of the problem. But it all comes back to this concept of sex being fun. I don't think, as I said before, Christians have done a great job of communicating the problem with the message sex is fun. I tend to hear the idea of sex is kind of like the Christmas gift that you really need to wait before you open. It'll be great. It'll be good. You just got to hang in there for a while, right? Does this sound like something that you've heard before? As long as you guys are patient, then the wait will be worth it and you'll enjoy it and it'll be great. This next clip I'm going to play you this is actually from the late 60s, so this has been going on a while. This is Woody Allen used to have a television show, and here he interviews Dr. Billy Graham, okay? And a member of the audience asks specifically this question.
Mr. Graham, I read that you don't believe in premarital sex relations. Is this true?
It's not a matter of what I believe, it's what the Bible teaches. And the Bible teaches that premarital sex relations are wrong.
Yeah, that's funny. To me, that would be like, like driving a car, getting a driver's license without a learner's permit first.
Let's just see now. We have to have rules to live by. And what we're saying is we're going to play a baseball game without any rules. We're going to play a football game without any rules. We're going to live a life without any moral rules. Well, God has laid down certain rules and said if you want the best of life and you want complete happiness and fulfillment, live by these rules. And one of those rules is that thou shalt not commit immorality.
But wait a minute. But if say you're dating a girl, right?
Well, I don't intend to date anyone.
No, but I mean, let's say
choose you.
Okay, say I'm dating a girl, and say I'm going to marry her, right? She's begged me to marry her. This was after a while. Or what's even more interesting, I'm forced to marry her, is what happens. And now, don't I want to get some inkling of the territory?
Well, you see, most psychologists today and most psychiatrists, I think, would agree with the Bible that there are very serious problems involved. God didn't say thou shalt not commit immorality before marriage in order to keep you from having a good time or having fun.
Yes, he did.
He said, he said that to protect you psychologically, to protect your body, because today venereal disease is at an all-time high in spite of all of our problems, and illegitimacy is at an all-time high in spite of all of our medical science. And all of these things, God said, I want to make you happy, I want to help you, and I've given you some rules to live by, and this is the rule.
Well, now, let me ask you a question. What if I marry the girl, then, and then if I finally do get to investigate her carnally, and it turns out she's an absolute yo-yo?
Well, I don't think that'll happen to you. I think that's a hypothetical question.
Yeah, but it happens to guys all the time.
Okay. Well, now, and I'm not trying to pick on Dr. Graham. I just thought that this was a very illustrative point. You see what he said. He said, number one, there are rules that we all have to follow. If you're going to play the game, you got to play by the rules. But why are the rules there? The rules are there to protect you so that you can have the best life you want. And Woody Allen's saying, well, that's not what I see as my best life, right? And we hear this today, we got to test drive the car before we buy it and all this ridiculousness. And he even points to psychologists and psychiatrists and venereal disease, and it's all you have to put off the fun for protection. That's the kind of concept that seems to be sex is good, created by God, to be enjoyed, but only in the context of marriage. And again, it's this Christmas present idea. And it's reinforced over and over and over in our society. So if you have a daughter who goes through a purity ceremony, she will hear something like this. The Purity Pledge reads, this is from True Love Waits, believing that true love waits, I make a commitment to God, myself, my family, my friends, my future mate, and my future children to be sexually abstinent from this day until the day I enter a biblical marriage relationship, as well as abstaining from sexual thoughts, touching, pornography, and actions that are known to lead to sexual arousal. So it's and none of this is wrong in and of itself. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it doesn't take willpower. It doesn't take initiative. It doesn't take a determination to do these things. But I think there's more there than all of this. It seems that the Christian message of sex is simply a sanitized version of the culture. Sex is fun, but you can only do it inside marriage. So what does that set us up for? What does that tell the single individual in society? Here is a activity, here is a pleasure to which you are not allowed to participate, right? What does that tell a man or a woman who's locked into a relationship? Maybe the husband is just dour, and she doesn't want to abandon God by divorcing him or anything like that, but there's no physical attraction. How do we deal with these kinds of issues? What does that tell kids who, my kids actually didn't want to wait to see their Christmas presents. They would actually hunt through the house and try and find them. We had to come up with ever more creative. Matter of fact, we started keeping them in the car. We had cubby holes in the car where we would hide the Christmas presents. Or we would have a Christmas tree that we'd have a container, artificial Christmas, and we put the Christmas presents back in the Christmas tree container because they'd never think of looking in the Christmas decorations box for the Christmas presents. So you got to outthink your. I have 4 boys. My wife is right over there. She is one of the Moab tribe, mothers of all boys, and you should really give her a hand because really rearing children in our household was a whip and a chair. It's just one of those things. But I digress. Anyway, so what's the result of all this? Now, more than just ourselves, there's some real damaging issues. This is Samantha Pugley, who wrote a very long article on her. It was entitled, "I Took a Christian Virginity Pledge as a Child and It Nearly Destroyed My Life," is what she said. And here's what she says in this article. She says, "The church taught me that sex was for married people. Extramarital sex was sinful and dirty, and I would go to hell if I did it. I learned that as a girl, and I had a responsibility to my future husband to remain pure for him." She says, "For more than a decade, I wore my virginity like a badge of honor. My church encouraged me to do so, saying my testimony would inspire other young girls to follow it. If the topic ever came up in conversation, I was happy to let people know that I had taken a pledge of purity. It became my entire identity by the time I hit my teen years. When I met my then boyfriend, now husband, I told him right away that I was saving myself for marriage, and he was fine with that because it was my body, my choice, and he loved me. We were together for 6 years before we got married. Anytime we did anything remotely sexual, guilt overwhelmed me. I wondered where the line was because I was terrified to cross it. Was he allowed to touch my breasts? Could we look at each other naked? I didn't know what was considered sexual enough to condemn my future marriage and send me straight to hell." Now, granted, I think she's got some misunderstandings here. But this is the message that a lot of the non-Christian world picks up, thinks that Christianity is actually saying. What happens, though, after she gets married is actually more telling and more worrisome to me than before. She said, "Sex hurt on her wedding night. I knew it would. Everyone told me it would be uncomfortable the first time. What they didn't tell me is that I would be back in the bathroom afterwards crying quietly for reasons I didn't yet comprehend. They didn't tell me that I'd be on my honeymoon crying again because sex felt dirty and wrong and sinful, even though I was married and it was supposed to be okay now." This lady actually left the faith because of this instance. And that's a tragedy because she's got the whole concept completely wrong. Now, I'm not saying our churches are teaching this specifically. I think she's taken it to a wrong degree. But what I am saying is a lot of people hear this message because you're young, you're trying to filter all this against your hormones, against your natural urges. How do you deal with it? Well, what we need to do is we need to look at how the Bible reflects sexual engagement. And the Bible actually talks about sex quite a bit.